Many people do something admirable. They walk every day. They reach 8,000, sometimes 10 or even 12,000 steps. They stay consistent for months. They feel proud of the discipline, and they should. But then they look in the mirror and notice something frustrating. Their belly fat looks exactly the same. So they assume the obvious explanation. They need to walk faster, longer, or harder. They add hills. They increase pace. They push themselves to sweat. Yet the result still barely changes. The scale may move slightly, but the abdominal area remains stubborn. Here is the uncomfortable possibility. The problem may not be effort, it may be timing. Let me ask you something. If we could pause time and look inside your fat cells during your daily walk, would they look calm or quietly locked? Because fat loss is not just about activity, it is about access. You can move your body and still not access stored energy if the internal conditions do not allow it. Most people assume any walking equals fat burning. Movement feels like it should automatically use body fat. After all, you are expending energy. But metabolic specialists see something very different. They see that walking at the wrong time of day may rely mostly on circulating glucose instead of stored fat. Your body is still working, calories are still used, but the fuel source is not what you expect. Stay with me, because what happens next is rarely explained in typical fitness advice. We usually talk about distance, intensity, and calorie burn. Yet the body does not choose fuel based only on effort. It chooses fuel based on hormonal permission. In other words, your walk might be effective exercise while still being ineffective fat access. You are not failing. Your body is following instructions. And once you understand what those instructions are, the frustration around stubborn belly fat begins to make sense. To understand why this happens, we need to shift attention away from fat itself and toward the system that controls it. Yes, fat cells store energy. But even more important is the hormonal environment that determines when stored energy is allowed to leave. The main characters here are insulin and cortisol. Imagine a warehouse storing valuable inventory. The workers inside represent your muscles, ready to use energy. The stored boxes represent body fat. But the door to the warehouse is locked. Insulin is that lock. If the workers move around outside the warehouse, they are still active. But they cannot access what is stored inside unless the lock opens. Walking is the movement of the workers. Hormones decide whether the door opens. After you eat, insulin rises. This is a helpful process because insulin guides nutrients into cells. However, while insulin is elevated, fat cells hold their stored energy. The body prefers to use incoming food first. So even if you walk after a snack or frequent small meals, your body often relies on circulating glucose rather than stored fat. Cortisol adds another layer. When stress is high, cortisol signals the body to maintain accessible, quick energy. In that state, fat usage can become less efficient, especially around the abdominal area. The body is prioritizing readiness, not fuel release. Here are a few numbers, not fear, just awareness. Insulin levels rise significantly after eating and can remain elevated for hours, depending on meal frequency. Studies examining low-intensity activity show higher fat oxidation when insulin is low compared to the same activity performed shortly after eating. This means walking does not decide which fuel you use. Hormones decide. The body is not refusing to burn fat. It is following protective instructions. When insulin is high, energy from food is available, so releasing stored fuel is unnecessary. When insulin falls, stored fuel becomes accessible. So the real question is not whether you walk. The real question is what hormonal state exists when you walk. Once you see this, the idea of the wrong time begins to make sense. Now let's slow down the moment you begin walking and observe what actually happens minute by minute inside your body. During the first 2 minutes, the ignition phase begins. You stand up, your posture changes, and your nervous system activates slightly. Your heart rate rises gently, and a small amount of adrenaline appears in circulation. This signal tells tissues that energy may be needed. Fat cells even receive the message to prepare for release, but another signal may already be present. If you recently ate or have been grazing throughout the day, insulin is still circulating. Insulin quietly overrides the fat release message. The body interprets the situation as simple. Food energy is available, so stored energy remains protected. Between 3 and 10 minutes, the shift phase occurs. Your stride stabilizes and your breathing becomes rhythmic. At this point, your body chooses its primary fuel source. This decision is not conscious and not based on effort. It is biochemical. If insulin is high, muscles absorb and use glucose from the bloodstream. The walk still requires energy, but the fuel is coming mainly from recent meals. Fat cells remain largely inactive. If insulin is low, fatty acids begin to enter circulation and muscles start using stored fuel. The same walk, the same pace, the same distance, but a completely different internal process. From 10 to 30 minutes, the training phase develops. This is where repetition matters. Your metabolism adapts to what you repeatedly practice. If most of your walks occur while insulin is elevated, your body becomes efficient at using glucose for walking. It learns that activity usually coincides with incoming food. But if your walks occur during low insulin periods, the body practices accessing fat. Transport systems for fatty acids become more active. Mitochondria become efficient at processing stored energy. Here is the key insight. You may unknowingly be training your body not to use fat during walking. Not because walking is ineffective, but because the timing teaches the body a different fuel preference. Your metabolism is not stubborn, it is adaptive. It simply becomes better at whatever pattern you repeat most often. Now let's go one layer deeper, because walking doesn't just use fuel in the moment. It teaches your metabolism what fuel to prefer in the future. Walking doesn't just burn energy, it trains your metabolic flexibility. Metabolic flexibility is your body's ability to switch between using glucose and using fat depending on availability. In a flexible system, when food is present, glucose is used efficiently. When food is absent, stored fat becomes accessible without stress. In an inflexible system, the body relies heavily on glucose and struggles to access stored energy. If you frequently snack and then walk, your body rarely experiences a low insulin window. Insulin remains elevated for much of the day. In that environment, walking reinforces glucose dependence. You are repeatedly telling your body that activity and food always occur together. Over time, the body adapts. It becomes very good at using glucose during movement, but less practiced at accessing fat. This is one reason some people can walk consistently and still see little change in abdominal fat. The fuel access pattern never shifts. Now here's the moment most people miss. The worst time to walk if your goal is belly fat reduction is during constant grazing, when insulin never truly drops. If you eat small snacks every couple of hours and walk shortly afterward each time, fat release windows are minimal. The body stays in storage mode most of the day. This does not mean post-meal walking is unhealthy. It improves glucose regulation. But if every walk occurs in a fed state and there is never a low insulin period, fat access remains limited. The body needs contrast. It needs periods where insulin is low and movement occurs simultaneously. That combination trains fat mobilization. Without that contrast, you may be doing everything right behaviorally, moving daily, staying active, yet not creating the hormonal environment required for belly fat to decrease. The walk itself is not the problem. The timing relative to your eating pattern determines the fuel lesson your body learns. And once you understand that, the frustration shifts from "why isn't walking working" to "when am I giving my body permission to access stored energy?" When this pattern continues for weeks and months, the effects become easier to recognize. People who walk regularly but always do so shortly after eating often notice a confusing situation. Their activity level is high, yet their weight stabilizes and abdominal fat changes very slowly. They feel hungry more often than expected, especially between meals, and they rely on frequent snacks for energy. Clinicians observing similar patterns often see stable body weight despite consistent activity. Resting heart rate and cardiovascular fitness may improve, but fat distribution remains stubborn. The issue is not lack of effort. The issue is fuel access never shifting. Because the body repeatedly experiences walking in a fed state, it anticipates glucose use for movement. When glucose drops later, hunger signals increase sooner. The body becomes dependent on incoming energy rather than comfortable using stored reserves. This creates a cycle: eat, walk, use glucose, feel hungry, eat again. Over time, metabolic flexibility decreases. The body still functions normally, but it prefers quick fuel. Belly fat persists because the body rarely practices releasing it. The abdominal area is particularly sensitive to hormonal signals, and without low insulin activity periods, its stored energy remains less utilized. Clinicians do not only measure body weight. They look at patterns such as energy stability across the day, recovery after activity, and how long a person can comfortably go between meals. When these markers suggest frequent hunger and constant intake, it often reflects reliance on circulating fuel rather than stored fuel. This does not mean walking is ineffective. It means the body is responding logically to repeated signals. If activity always follows eating, the body expects fuel to come from food. If activity sometimes occurs when food is not arriving, the body adapts differently. So over months, the timing of your walks can shape how your metabolism behaves. Consistent fed-state walking may maintain health and circulation, but it may not strongly challenge stored energy use. Introducing low insulin movement changes the message your body receives. The result is not immediate dramatic fat loss. The result is a gradual shift in how your body chooses its fuel. When researchers began comparing activity timing rather than just activity amount, several results surprised people. Surprise number 1: more steps do not always equal more fat loss. Two people can walk the same distance every day and see very different changes in body composition depending on when the walking occurs relative to meals. Surprise number 2: frequent eating can suppress fat oxidation more than inactivity alone. If insulin remains elevated most of the day due to constant grazing, the body rarely enters a state where stored fuel is needed. Even active individuals may primarily use circulating glucose. Surprise number 3: slow walking during low insulin periods can outperform longer fed-state walking for fat access. The pace does not have to be intense. The hormonal environment determines fuel selection more than effort level. Surprise number 4: timing consistency matters more than total step count for metabolic training. When the body repeatedly experiences movement during low insulin windows, it practices releasing fatty acids and becomes more efficient at doing so. The important lesson is subtle. Walking is always beneficial for circulation, mood, and cardiovascular health. But fat access responds to context. The body interprets signals, not just actions. If movement consistently occurs while energy from food is abundant, the body chooses convenience. If movement sometimes occurs when food is not immediately available, the body adapts to use stored energy. This explains why some individuals increase exercise intensity without seeing expected changes in belly fat. They change effort, but not environment. The hormonal context stays the same. So the goal is not extreme fasting or exhausting workouts. The goal is simply creating occasional low insulin movement periods so the body remembers how to access stored fuel. Over time, that ability strengthens. Once you understand this, walking stops being a single uniform habit. It becomes a tool you can place strategically in your day to influence how your body manages energy. Before we finish, a safety note matters. This is not about extreme fasting or forcing yourself to exercise when you feel weak. Gentle timing adjustments are enough. If you feel dizzy, shaky, or unwell during a walk, your body is asking for support. Hydration, adequate nutrition across the day, and a comfortable pace are essential. You should still be able to talk while walking. The goal is metabolic guidance, not physical strain. Now think back to the question from the beginning. If we could pause time and look inside your fat cells during your walk, would they look calm or quietly locked? For many people, they were not resisting effort. They were waiting for permission. Without a low insulin window, the body had no reason to release stored energy. Once the timing changes, the signal changes. At the start, we thought the issue was walking effectiveness. Now you can see it is a relationship. Activity and hormones respond to each other. Your body adapts to what you repeatedly ask. If you repeatedly walk only when fuel from food is abundant, the body learns to rely on incoming energy. If you occasionally walk when fuel must come from storage, the body relearns access. So what surprised you most? When do you usually walk? Right after meals? Randomly? Or at consistent times? Share your routine in the comments. Someone else may realize they have been working hard but sending mixed signals. And in the next video, I will show you a simple weekly walking schedule that supports fat access without increasing workout intensity.